Good morning, everyone. Well, obviously, nobody's been able to join at the time. Again, don't worry, this will be recorded and it will be on Moodle for you to pick up at a later stage. These tutorials are an integral part of your learning. And again, I would say, if you've got a problem with Moodle or you're not getting into Moodle, then please let us know. Also, a number of you now have had work due for some time. Of course, work deposited on Moodle will be picked up by me and obviously dealt with, assessed and sent back if it's either passed or if it needs more work. So again, don't worry about these things. Everything's available to you, not necessarily just at this session. What I'm going to look at is, because we started late on that because of the rescheduling, I will carry on now with the part 2 of the second part of the Unit 1 rather than Unit 3, which is down on the list. So, session. Lots of things to look at, lots of things to do. Some of the things I'm going to look at in this one are tutorial of the purpose of this assessment session, will help you gain an overview of assessment for learning. Effective learning strategies are instrumental in training and development excellence, or training, teaching and learning excellence. We'll be concentrating on a key theme for considering different teaching strategies to promote effective learning. Assessment is a central process in education. It's only through assessment that we can find out who is learning what and what learning has taken place, and the adjustments our teaching needs to be made to our teaching. It's different slightly from ordinary assessment of skills, but the processes are exactly the same. Over the past 2 decades, we have learned a great deal about the type of assessment which promotes learning. Inside the black box, Black and William, 1998, you can read through that study and have a look. Formative assessment, or what is now known as assessment for learning, is important for all learners, but in the case of the black box study, it was found that the most effective, it was for low achievers. One of the most effective learning strategies, according to Black and William, is that of feedback. And this is where the assessment process starts. Formative assessment can be looked at 2 ways. The first way is that the student you do some teaching, the student produces a bunch of work and passes it through, and after a period of time of learning, an assessment is made of that work. Feedback is given, and if there's corrections or additions need to be made, then they can be done at that stage. But modern thinking looks at it slightly differently, in that formative assessment goes on all the time. It's not just given at one point. So that you've initial assessment, you've diagnostics before the student starts. Once the student makes headway and is in learning, then the teacher will make judgments about each individual class, where they're up to, what they're doing, who's doing well, who's not doing so well. So that is another form of formative assessment. It will be a point where feedback's given formally, but informal feedback, verbal feedback given regularly makes a huge difference. It involves getting children or students to think about their learning and consider the next steps and support them with strategies to improve. Writing well done on a student work doesn't really provide them with the next steps for learning. Giving them a star or a grade in children's cases is very limited in terms of feedback. Feel good fact, but that's about all. A lot of the time, it's impersonal. What type of feedback then? We may find it helpful to read this list of MOOCs and stuff, and also some of the ones who are teaching children. There's some stuff in there, teachers feedback to young children. Formative assessment, a typology, infiltrating learners into communities of practice, raising achievement through classroom assessment. If you've got groups of students who are not doing too well and you've got students that are doing very well, you can make up groups and put a mixture into the group and they learn from each other. But written feedback, again, will be at a later date, and it's how, and if you think about it, in the old days you used to go to school, you got a report at the end of school and that was your feedback. You've not done very well or you've done very well, and yeah, it wasn't very good. But teachers have to be careful now in their marking, deciding which pieces of work you give particular attention to and which aspects of the work to focus on. What you'll notice in the units that you're doing and the ones that you've done if you are involved in the teaching level 5, well, those of you that have received feedback from me will find that I've written in each element of each part of the unit, I've written comment in there in red for you to pick up on. But it's not just comment, it will say, if there's something wrong, it will say what it is, but it will also say what you need to do to improve it. And make, well, the suggestions, I'm not telling you, you must do this or you must do that, but they're suggestions for you to think about when you need to add work. Or it's usually, at this level, it's in terms of adding work, because once you get past level 4 and you're into level 5, 6, 7, the depth of work needs to be much greater. The command verbs that you're given need to be much greater. Need to be adhered to much better. Below that, obviously, you can get away with a certain amount, but once you get to this level, then it requires accurate feedback to point you in that direction. Teachers have identified success related to learning outcomes, pointing out particular parts of the work or making specific comments about it as a whole. But again, at the end of each of the assessments that you'll get, it's not just your script back. You'll get a detailed comment in each of the boxes on the front sheet and an overall comment at the bottom in the end, more or less saying this is what you need to do. Sort of a précis of the whole assessment outcome. A lot of the time, assessment is working in other ways, in that it's not a pass or fail. If you've got exam-based qualifications and somebody fails the exam, they feel down, rejected, that is their feedback, and it's difficult. With assessment, it's ongoing. And once you've actually achieved the standard, then the student feels motivated then to move on from there. But teachers work together to improve the quality of feedback, and they value the quality of the, not the quantity. That's what I say. Sometimes my comments will be quite concise, but they say exactly what needs to be said, not what somebody wants to hear. Yeah. So it's not the amount of comment there; it's what it actually says. Sometimes students will contribute to an add comment when they reflect on their own work, and reflective learning is inbuilt into your programs as well. There are sections of a unit or elements within the unit that ask you to reflect on what you are doing in your own school, in your own situation, because sometimes that will trigger off other things. It may be that what you're doing is not as good as you want it to be, but sometimes it may be resources or other things like that that are outside your immediate control that are stopping it from improving. And there, when the feedback needs to go to school of the things they need to improve. So yeah, it's an ongoing process for everyone. Think about feedback strategies. Again, it can just not be verbal and written. There are other ways of giving feedback. If you've got classroom-based research working inside the black box, ATHE 2003, identified several helpful strategies for teachers that they could use to support the kind of assessment that will yield feedback. Sharing learning intentions with the learners at the beginning of the session. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Revising these intentions at the end. So it's like the old one when I first started many years ago in teaching. Tell them what you want to tell them, and then tell them what they've just told them. I know that sounds odd, but it's exactly what happens. You're reinforcing what you're actually going to say. So you're telling people that they have what you're going to say and outline. You tell them in the middle of it exactly what the information is that you need to impart to them. And at the end, you give a conclusion of what you've just done. Sharing learning intentions with learners at the beginning of the lesson, revising these and encouraging the students to think before responding to questions, giving them wait time, not making a requirement of learners to raise their hands or permission to speak, offering comments that are relevant to the particular qualities of the work rather than marks or grades. You've noticed on the forms, on ours, we don't give grades or marks, although we're being pushed to do that now, and I don't agree with it, but that's a personal thing. But we refer to the work as not yet achieved. In other words, there's nothing basically wrong with the work. It is improving, but it would need to do this and this before it would get to an acceptable standard. Again, this is an activity you can do yourself. Think of a lesson you've briefly taught. Identify some of the strategies that have been used for the following. Gathering the response of all learners, allowing learners to work with each other and assess their work and that of their peers. This is what I said, changing them in groups, putting a mixed group together, some that are good achievers, some that are less good achievers. And using questioning techniques that don't require yes or no, that require thinking, so that they've got to think before they respond. Again, all these give you feedback from the students, from them to you, as to how they are learning. A lot of the things we do on here, we understand what counts as good work or the standard. It's very difficult, however, to do that, and it's essential that the pupil or the students need that to make progress. What is important is that all learners need specific guidance in order to make those next steps to learning. Teachers' role is to offer this guidance through the use of various formative assessment strategies. Like I said, formative assessment is not at fixed point. It's an ongoing process through this learning sessions. If you remember, we go back to teaching. You've got a scheme of work to over a period of time, and you've got lesson plans to reach that goal. Using some of these techniques may take longer. Some of them may be less concise than just giving instructions, so that, do that, and then marking them later. But the amount of result you get at the end is far greater than the previous method I've just mentioned. Encouraging students to discuss samples of strong or weak performance. One of the things that if you go on a course for assessors, once you're a qualified assessor, they will present you with a piece of work that is good and a piece of work, or several pieces of work that are good and bad from students. And then they'll have, you've probably got 6 or 8 of you in the room, you'll all be given that work and asked to assess it and to see what levels, or different levels, different people are giving. And this is what we call those standardization meetings, which I'll probably mention again for those of you who do the IQA. Having students divide questions which are appropriate to the assessment of their own work, rather than just answering other people's questions. These are examples that involve students thinking about their learning experiences and their performance. It's like if an assessor is making an assessment of a work-based piece of learning, they will have a job to do. Something simple like changing a tyre or a wheel, and the mechanic or apprentice mechanic will go through that process. At the end of that session, the first thing the assessor would probably say to the experienced assessor would probably say to the student, how do you think that went? Immediately, it's a natural thing, they will pull out all the things that didn't go right. If there were, many, but they will exaggerate them. And that's good, because then you can come back with, actually, it wasn't that bad. You did this, you did that, you did that. All right, there was a little bit of a problem there, but you dealt with it. And it gives that support, but it makes a student think about what they're doing. Again, Black and Williams, in the review, inside the black box, discuss the power of oral feedback to students, and in particular they refer to the quality of the interaction between teacher and student. Teachers do spend a great deal of time asking questions. So what could they do differently? Analysis of questions teachers ask in classrooms shown that many teachers ask questions that test the ability of the students to recall facts, rather than the ability of students to apply or synthesize or explain their knowledge. So that means higher order questions. This is what I said. You're not asking direct information, like remembering things, facts, like it's just said, like I don't know, times tables or something like that. This is asking them to think about what they're doing. A lot of the things on these slides are, I'm not going to go through in detail every one, but a lot of them just need to be read through. That will give you further insight into the questions on your particular, we'll look at those in a minute, on each learning objective. A system exists for organising those thinking skills. It's called Bloom's taxonomy. It's a hierarchical system of ordering thinking skills from lower to higher, with the higher levels including all of the cognitive skills from the lower levels. Again, wait time. This is what I said before, that it can sometimes, using this different technique, initially it can take longer. Because you've got to provide, if you're going to ask questions that don't require simple answers or require some thinking time, you've got to give them that thinking time. I know it sounds stupid to say, but if you don't think about it, it's not something that you would do automatically. Again, in many classrooms, students are given a second to answer a question. Rowe found in 1974 that to increase the time to around 3 or 4 seconds or more when a question has been asked can have dramatic effects. The more students get involved, the student responses are greater, the students comment on each other's ideas, and a greater variety of ideas. Wait time is not that effective with recall questions. It doesn't matter because they've got to remember it. You probably will. If you've learned things off by heart, there's something that you remember regularly, like 7 and 63, you don't even have to think about them. So again, it doesn't really matter. In addition, some teachers may use wait time, but it does not work because the questions could be inappropriate. If you're going to ask questions that require time, then there's got to be more questioning questions rather than just straightforward question answer. Looking at understanding rather than just knowledge. This is mainly for, it works mainly with younger students, not all children, but it works with shy and less confident students who don't really get involved, or they're on the outskirts of the class. It's important to pick these up, because once they get into the regime of answering questions and being with the mainstream, then their confidence jumps miles, and very quickly too. This is talking partners program. Basically, looking at people when they're talking, looking interested, don't let other things distract you. Let your partner express his point of view. Think about what the other person is saying. Stay focused. Try to be clear about what you mean and when to speak. Say more than one or two words. Be prepared to compromise or constructively persuade. Sometimes let go of what you wanted to say if you think your partner's train of thought is more interesting. And again, this issue of collaborative learning is picked up here, so that you get more ideas from other people when you're part of a group, rather than outside it. Yeah. Again, how to avoid being caught, it's merely just the exact opposite. Yeah. We mentioned this earlier, the no hands up strategy. You don't have to ask permission to speak. If there was somebody involved in this discussion now on camera, then all the time I'm speaking, if they want to speak or want to ask a question, then it's not a problem. You just link into that and get involved. You don't have to wait to be asked. It's as simple as that. So this is just a development on. You can look at this at your own speed. Developing full understanding of ideas. This is what I come back to, this word understanding. There's a big difference between learning knowledge and understanding. Lots of people seem to miss this, and this whole point of this assessment process is to check on understanding. Knowledge can be gained quite quickly and easily, in some respects, but you get, let me say, high achievers. They go on to university and they study and they achieve a degree, and they've gone from junior school to higher school to further education to university. They've never, in a lot of cases, had a job. They've never been involved in the world of work. And then all of a sudden, when they've got the degree, they want to go out and get a job. And they expect our employers to fall over themselves to employ them. That whole process has proved that they are good at learning. It doesn't prove that they're good at understanding. Once they're in a work environment, applying that learning gives understanding. And it's that employers are looking for today. Difficult, you might say. Well, yeah, because you're in the right position, because the process you're going through now is at a later point. Some of you may have already got a degree. Some of you may have other qualifications. Some of you may be the first qualifications you've got because you've been in the environment. So you've got the best of both worlds. You've got either the higher learning, but you've also got the understanding that work in the real world has taught you. One of the things that we do lesson planning for, and also schemes of work, is to develop a fuller understanding of an idea. Be clear about the key issues in a lesson. Easily recall existing knowledge. Be able to link up ideas in the lesson with their existing knowledge. Tackle problems at a deep level and be able to extend thinking. It's a lot of the time, and this is a big problem in school age education, is that children go through a process of learning in school, and a percentage of them gain that knowledge and understanding. Another percentage of them, and unfortunately quite a large one, it goes over their heads. They can remember bits of it or ideas that were in the lesson or in the whole class, in the whole year, I should say. But the exam results at the end are proving that the understanding is not there. And whole groups are just being left to leave school at 16 with very little understanding of what it was all about. I can relate to that, is that I was what they call a late flapper. I went to school, left at 50, as we left earlier in those days, with no particular qualifications, but a good basic education, I like to think. But once I left and decided I want to be an engineer, then I found that I would have to go through a lot of the things that I was supposed to have learned already, again, to actually build that understanding, especially in mathematics. As a mechanical engineer, it's the basis of everything that you do. Now, isn't it strange that after having, 10 years of school, 9 years of school, I haven't learned very much, or I didn't appear to have learned very much, but in the next 3-4 years at college, I learned to a much, much higher level and reached higher national diploma. That was the difference between being taught in a way I understood, rather than just learning things for the sake of going through the process. What next? Teachers teaching the same topic can brainstorm some questions and use at the start of the lesson. One of the things that I mentioned earlier was that this, for the IQA group, is standardization. This, in effect, is the same thing. If you're looking at teachers teaching the same topic and you can brainstorm some of the questions to use at the start of the lesson, you'll come up with far more ideas because you are together as a group rather than you are on your own. And then you're all going to be using the same type of questions so that your students through that process, no matter which of the teachers it's got, will be taking advantage of that brainstorming process. Try to predict the type of range of questions and what to do next. Discuss the evidence of how well the students are learning and consider how the questions and follow-up enable student learning, or otherwise. This is what I said, this is picking up the understanding. Discuss any possible revisions and plan responses. Observe each other and teach or team teach the questions. Maybe make an audio recording or like a video like this one. After lessons, discuss part of the questions that they did use and what styles of dialogue are evident in the classroom. A lot of the time, teachers feel on their own. This is actually bringing them together to make them part of a group, and that makes the difference for the teacher's own confidence as well as anything else. Peer assessment and self-assessment. These are processes that we've just discussed previously. A lot of the time, the self-assessment and peer assessment can be, for younger groups, it can be unproductive because it becomes, it can lead to arguments in the classroom. Whereas with older groups, it works fine. Because that way, it's this collaborative learning thing. Working together, they find the understanding. It may be that one of the students didn't quite get something, and when actually talking together and mention things, suddenly go, oh yeah, right. And that makes a whole difference to the whole process. Again, modelling. It needs to be tackled in stages. This, you can't just suddenly go into this process. Initially, students need to have the process model for them using examples and work that demonstrates the intended learning outcomes. And the previous teaching examples from other students' work. Sometimes, an example of that is that sometimes we will send, excuse me, we will send a student some work from a student that's passed for them to look at as an example, and that makes the difference in the understanding again. Sometimes it's helpful to think aloud while critiquing what the students develop, while the students develop the necessary language and approach. Again, this is just going through what I've just been discussing now. It's developing that. And final thoughts, you can read those for yourself. Another thing I want to look at this morning before we actually nope, that's not the one. But I'll go that. I'll pick this up while I'm here. This is building up your portfolio for learning and assessment. And it's really, you can go through this on yourself afterwards, but it's mainly introducing principles involving the implementation of portfolios, providing guidelines on the criteria and standards when the portfolios are used for assessment, and it illustrates how valid they are, reliable, and they address assessment processes. Purposeful collection of students' work that tells the story of the student's efforts. Again, when you produce a piece of work for the unit, then you'll pass that through and I will pick that up. Again, the portfolio will be used to develop the work. This is the bit where we've got not yet achieved. It could be that the work is getting on there, but it's still not achieving. And only from the feedback given it will improve. Each will contain what we term as pieces of evidence, yeah, so that we've got evidence that meets the criteria or learning objectives in there. And therefore, I produce those sheets. I'll put that down for now. Bit slow this morning again. The system crashed on me earlier on, so I hope that's not going to occur again. No, here we are. Yeah. We covered some of this previously, but I'm going to cover it again now. Is you've got explain the function of assessment of hearing, assessment and learning within those PowerPoints. You have information, so expand on the information. PowerPoint. It says most of the things are on the expand from the information of the PowerPoint. Expand to the PowerPoint. So using those, which again, the resources are online on the Moodle system for you to pick up. At the end of this, I have put some notes. The aim of this unit is to assess candidate assessors' knowledge and understanding of the principles and practices that underpin assessment. All learning outcomes for this unit must be assessed using methods appropriate to the assessment of. Knowledge and understanding must include observation of performance, examining work products, questioning. Direct evidence of this kind can be submitted where necessary with professional discussion. This is something that we can use where you want to fill in details with a student, or I need to do that, then I will put some professional discussion in there. Almost all the information for this is covered in the PowerPoint slides provided. Obviously, contact your tutor should you have any further questions. Yeah. We're going through those points: observation of performance, example products of work, questioning, direct evidence, professional discussion. Evidence that you produce must come from your assessor's candidate performance in the work that you. So, when I say that you need to provide evidence of what you've assessed, then it will be copies of your students' work and the assessment decisions that you have made about it on actual form, copies of actual forms. If there are issues regarding confidentiality, then students' names must be taken out, of course, but that doesn't matter. The evidence from the assessments that you've done must be actual copy documents, not just blank documents saying this is what we use, yeah, because that's not fulfilling the required learning objectives, yeah. So that completes Unit 1. The next program, or part of the program on this, will be on Unit 3, which is more practically based. I have some more slides to show you, and a number of other strategies for practical assessment. Thanks for listening. I'm going to close the program as of now.